Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eaterberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with John DiLeo, author of the book Not Even Nominated, 40 Overlooked Co-Stars of Oscar-Winning Performances. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. John DiLeo is an author originally from Brooklyn, New York, who has been writing about the film industry for over 25 years. His books include And You Thought You Knew Classic Movies, Screensavers, 40 Remarkable Movies Awaiting Rediscovery, and There Are No Small Parts, 100 Outstanding Film Performances with Screen Time of 10 minutes or less. And he is a regular participant in the Black Bear Film Festival in Milford, PA. He joins me on the podcast to talk about his latest book, Not Even Nominated, 40 Overlooked Co-Stars of Oscar-Winning Performances. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's good to be with you.
So I love the general theme of your books, which often seek to highlight some underappreciated or even lesser-known films and roles. What was the inspiration for this book specifically on the Oscars?
Like you said, I think my unofficial mission statement from the beginning of this sort of ride with the books is to bring to light movies that I felt were underappreciated and overlooked through the years, overshadowed by the agreed upon classics of the last 100 years or so. And in this case, specifically in terms of awards, of who was overlooked from that kind of attention, who was insufficiently praised, and specifically with this concept for this book, insufficiently praised when someone else in the movie actually won an Oscar. And as you know, sometimes I think that there was someone else in the movie certainly as good, sometimes even better, and that person wasn't nominated. So it was sort of like giving the due to those sort of overlooked people.
Yeah, and Not Even Nominated dovetails perfectly with the other half of my podcast where I have guests on to talk about the Oscar-nominated films of the past. I'm currently working my way through the films of the Second Academy Award, so it was nice to read some of the earlier films that you talked about, Seventh Heaven and Sunrise, which I just covered on that part of my podcast. Why did you feel it was important to include films from that early in the Oscar period, as well as some of the more later things that you have in there as well?
Well, I think even from the beginning when I started doing books, because my heart belongs to what I'd say call the golden age of Hollywood, I kept wanting to broaden the audience and not just make it about that. So I would try in almost all of the books to come up with a concept that could take me up to and now 25 years into the 21st century. And so as you know, with this book, among the faces on the cover are Glenn Close and Denzel Washington. So that might catch younger people's eyes. But once they pick it up, they can read about a couple of silent movies as well. And maybe I'll get them to investigate Seventh Heaven or Sunrise and find out who Charles Farrell and George O'Brien and Trevor Morris, who these people were. And I have to say, it gives me great pleasure when I'm sitting down and thinking, I can't believe I'm gonna write 4 pages on George O'Brien. I hope that would please him because he's not much talked about anymore.
Yeah.
So that is one of my great pleasures to, like I said, bring to light these often forgotten people, often forgotten movies.
Yeah, I know when I sat down to watch Seventh Heaven and Street Angel, obviously I knew the name Janet Gaynor, but Charles Farrell wasn't as familiar to me. So it's definitely nice to see them highlighted, and hopefully we can bring some more awareness to those folks.
Right, and if you've won the Oscar, like Janet Gaynor was the first Best Actress, so even if people don't know what she looks like, even that's a name in the history books
Right.
for that. Whereas the guy in the same movie with her, because he wasn't a winner or even a nominee, has fallen kind of by the wayside.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, this book you include 40 actors in the book, but obviously you had almost a century now at this point of Oscar-nominated films and roles to pick from. How did you go about narrowing down the list of films and actors for this book particularly?
Well, the one good thing about the concept was it was working off a finite list.
Yeah.
Like someone had to win an Oscar, so that is immediately that particular list. And then to look at every single winner and see if there was someone else in that movie that was overlooked. So I wasn't sort of casting a crazy wide net. It was very finite. So anyway, I made a bigger list, obviously more than 40 of any possible contenders, And then I, relook at everything, and some I just didn't think were worthy, or some not so much. And it just sort of felt comfortable arriving at the number of 40, even though I didn't really start out with a number in mind.
Yeah, and on that note, were there any particular roles or films that you wanted to include? And what was 41 or 42 on the list? If there were last couple things that were cut that you would have liked to add, if you didn't want to keep it at a nice round number.
As I was working on it, I don't know if it was about a third of the way, I actually called my publisher to say, do you care if it's a 40 or a 50, or can it be 42, 43, or 47? And she said, make it whatever you need it to be. So I had the freedom to make it 42 or 43, which I guess actually made it easier than to make it 40. I don't My point being, I had free reign, and I didn't have a 41 or 42. It just kind of naturally ended up at 40. So I don't look back and think, damn, I wish I could have included so and so, or oh, why did I stretch it and include so and so? It just kind of happened that way. My one real concern in the process was to have it as evenly spaced through the decades as I could make it, which isn't particularly easy, but every decade is represented. I think there are more from the 60s than any other decade, but there are no huge gaps, which I think would have been weird to, like, have a 25-year gap in the middle of this, essentially an Oscar history.
Yeah, no, I think it's very evenly spaced. There's people things that people will recognize from the last 20, 30 years or so, but also some older films that may be overlooked as films, but also as roles, like you have said.
And I particularly loved I lucked out that perhaps the two most famous Golden Age stars who were never nominated for an Oscar, were able to be in this book, Edward G. Robinson and Myrna Loy. I was happy that the concept allowed for them to be in it, having played opposite someone who won, and so I could pay tribute to perhaps the two most overlooked people in Oscar history.
Yeah, yeah, that's always good to be able to do that. Now, it's hard to narrow down hundreds or thousands of performances in films in a given year to just the 20 nominees for the four acting categories. Obviously, you've done a lot of research into these categories for this book. With that in mind, what's one thing you think the Academy might be able to do to provide a wider array of films and roles in those nominations? I'm giving you the golden ticket to do whatever you want to fix the Academy's acting categories right now.
Well, I'd say, what I'm about to say has kind of always been true, but it seems to be much more severe right now. And I think this whole thing of when you have two people in the same movie with essentially the same size of roles, they immediately put one of them in the supporting category to double their chances of winning, even though it's ridiculous. So you've had some, very good performances win in the supporting category that had no business being there, like Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or this year's Zoe Saldana and Emilia Perez. Very good performances, leading roles, and I think I don't know how they would police it if you could actually go by a stopwatch and you'd have to submit your performance and tell you, you have to be, say, less than 45 minutes of screen time to be supporting or something, but it just has gotten so out of hand that some years it looks like there are no supporting performances. So it would be nice if it could be fairer and you can get more actual supporting performances at the Oscars. Now, this second thing I'm going to say is not really, it doesn't really answer your question, but it is one of my other pet peeves. And I really wish they go back to 5 Best Picture nominees. I don't like the 10. You can never remember what they are. There's too many. And in the lead up, when they talk about all the favorites, well, they all get in because now there's so many slots. It was so much more interesting, and it meant more when it was 5. Now, when you look back at the 30s and early 40s when there were 10 and sometimes 12, it's kind of cool to look back on that period and see what was up for it. But I don't know, it just, I find it right now, I find it really frustrating, and I don't think they're going to do it because they think it helps more movies by having a Best Picture nomination, but it so dilutes the impact of it, and so I don't think I don't think there is any value in it. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's all.
No, those are some good recommendations. I could definitely get behind those. Now, I have a couple of questions not specifically related to the book, but before I move on, is there anything else you want to touch on about Not Even Nominated?
No, I guess what I was basically saying about Edward G. Robinson and Myrna Loy, the book was also a way to write about a number of people like Joel McCrae that I absolutely love, and it was really a chance to kind of cut loose and talk about these wonderful careers, not just the specific movie that I was focused on. And again, like I said, if you can make one or two, or maybe more than that, people go, oh, well, if he's so into this person, I'm gonna check these out and I hope I open up a whole new window of classic movies to people.
Fantastic. Well, this might be the hardest question I ask all day, but if you had to pick your top three films of all time, what would they be?
Yes, that's a mean question. Actually, I have my favorite movie of all time, because that one I am asked quite often, and I do have a real answer. And my favorite movie of all time is Vincent Minnelli's The Bandwagon from 1953 with Fred Astaire. That's my favorite movie. That's my favorite musical, my favorite Fred Astaire movie. He's my favorite performing artist of the 20th century. It sort of checks all the boxes. Again, not the greatest movie, of course, but my favorite.
Sure.
So I actually wrote down five more, if you'll allow me, just movies that I absolutely love and would never tire of. The African Queen, Now Voyager, The Purple Rose of Cairo, Sullivan's Travels, and Notorious. And I'm sure if you asked me tomorrow, I'd have different ones, but
Sure.
I do love those. So
Excellent recommendations all around. Now, if you could invite any three movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why?
I think this one is worse than the other question, actually. You would tip me off on this one, and so I've been thinking about it, and there's so many different ways you could go. I thought, well, if you love, say, Jimmy Stewart, you can invite three different Jimmy Stewart characters and spend the dinner with just him. Or, you could pick one movie. You could say, I want to talk to the three people, my three favorite people in All About Eve, and just listen to them banter.
Yeah.
And then I thought what would be really fun, along the lines of the All About Eve idea, was to invite three of the greatest female wisecrackers of the golden age and just sit back and let them top each other with clever quips. So I was thinking, yes, from All About Eve, Thelma Ritter's Birdie, and from Mildred Pierce, Eve Arden's Ida, and then from A Letter to Three Wives, Linda Darnell's Laura May, and maybe Ida Lupino's Lily in Roadhouse. How fun it would be to hear all of them go at it at the same time, and maybe I can get a word in, but
Right.
I wouldn't care. And if I had to throw a guy into the mix, I was just thinking how much I love Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and to be around Gary Cooper in his prime, so charming, so likable, and so good and decent and no nonsense. So I'm all over the place with that, Jonathan.
Sure. No, it sounds like an entertaining party for sure. Now, do you have any books that you could recommend that you've read recently or ones that you really enjoy? Could be fiction or nonfiction, don't necessarily have to be related to movies.
Well, I'll start with I'm a big fan of novelist Ann Tyler, and she has a new one, 3 Days in June, that I recently read and loved. I'm also at a moment in my family, we two family members have also published books in the last few months. My niece, stand-up comedian Hannah Berner, has a bestseller called How to Giggle, and my brother Michael has a collection of short stories about growing up on Long Island called There Are Places I'll Remember. So I've been telling people we're like the Brontes, but a lot more fun to be around. So I don't know if that's true, but anyway, I do want to do a plug for movie books. The person who I think I idolized even before I was writing about movies, when I was just reading about them, was of course the great Pauline Kael, the New Yorker critic. And I was lucky enough to get to know her in her final years, and I had just started to write about film, and she actually did give me a quote for my quiz book, and you thought you knew classic movies. But the thing I want to recommend to your listeners is that if you love movies and care about expressing how you feel about them, whether just informally or as a writer, she is the best lesson in how to sort of just have access to your thoughts and feelings. Like there's nothing between her brain and her pen, And there's a freedom in her writing that I often feel inspired by. Like, get out of your way and just say what you think and write it. And I just love that about her. So any of the books, which are all collections of her individual reviews, are of great value. Whether you agree with her or not, you can think she's lost her mind on some of her judgments about a certain. You can. It doesn't matter because it's still a joy to read, and I always feel like I'm inspired by, like I said, her freedom.
Yeah.
That's her great gift.
Wonderful. Well, we'll be sure to put some links to those so people can check them out, the family ones and the others that you mentioned. Who else from the world of film should or film writing should I have on the podcast?
Well, I didn't think of specifics because it's such a wide spectrum of people, but I was just generally to say, basically people like me, people who are out there writing about film, because I'm sure you feel that people you enjoy talking to most are the people who are as passionate as you are about the subject. And people who spend years working on an individual book are those people. So I'd say, anybody who's out there who's sending you their book or who wrote about something you're interested in, these people, we love to talk about our love. And I think people enjoy hearing passionate people talk about their passions. And I'd also say invite fellow podcasters, because through the last, this podcasting era, which came around after I was writing books, but in the last, say, 5 to 7 years, I've gotten to know a lot of you. And I love talking to you because you're the people keeping this alive. You're the people where I can go on and do what I'm doing right now and get the word out about what I do. And you often, I think, should have each other on and, talk shop. And I think you'd all really enjoy each other and again, inspire each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. And lastly, before we wrap up, what projects are you working on next? Do you have any other books in the works? And also, where can people follow you on social media to keep up with your work?
Okay, the social media for you can follow me on Instagram at john.dileo.12. I'm on Facebook. I have a regular friend page and an author page. I have an Amazon author page. I have a website, johndileo.com. So I'm very available. Not hard to find or get to. I am working on a new book. It's funny. After every book, I always say to myself, seriously, well, I'm never doing that again because I have no more ideas. It's over. I'll never have another idea. I'm dry as a bone. And it's usually about 8 months later where I kind of just all of a sudden I have an idea and I don't remember where it came from. I'm just like, oh, and then I start doing. Anyway, I am writing a new book. I started May 1st, so I have a year to finish it. It'll be out in 2027. I'm not supposed to say anything more about it at this point, but I will tell you again, it spans the decades. So I will hit the oldies and the more recent stuff and try to write about it's a concept that will cover quite an array of actors, directors, and movies. So I'll be entertaining myself at least for the next year or so.
Well, can't wait to see, learn more about that and see what the general topic is on that one. So looking forward to that.
All right, I'll let you know certainly when I can.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thanks for sharing the book. I really appreciated you sharing some of the stories about when it went into making the book. And like I said, can't wait to see what the next one brings.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Thank you again to my guest today, John DiLeo. His book, Not Even Nominated, is out now and available everywhere books are sold. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eaterberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eaterberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out the Oscar Project online at theoscarproject.substack.com. I'll be back on Friday with Louis Beer to discuss the 1929 film The Letter, and next Tuesday I'll have an interview with Jake Wachtel, director of the short film Century. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.